How's it going, guys? It's Anthony with A&M Freight Management. Just giving you a quick video on contracts, long term versus short term. What are the pros? What are the cons? What do I prefer? I prefer not to do long term contracts, and there's a couple of reasons why I don't like long term contracts. Long term contracts kind of get you locked in on a specific price. If you have a price that's based off of January 1st of 2023, and then that contract goes all the way till January 1st of 2024. A lot can change within that time. I know most contracts have a fuel surcharge built into them that account for fluctuations in fuel price during the transportation process. However, that does not take into account fluctuations in market pricing. Right now, you got to understand that for the trucking industry, on the trucker side of it, carriers are facing almost what the regular day-to-day job holder was facing during COVID. Okay, the mass layoffs, the lack of available work, the lack of money available, except maybe even a little worse because there's no PPP right now. There's no government checks. There's none of that. During COVID, carriers were busier than ever. People were home. They were getting checks from the government. They were trying to keep themselves sane during the lockdown, so they were buying a lot of things. They were doing projects around the house. They were doing things that were out of the ordinary to be done all in one time. So the trucking industry was booming. There was a lot of freight moving around. There was, truckers didn't really miss a step during COVID. Now you fast forward 2 or 3 years later, and the available freight is very, very limited right now. So what that means is that the trucking industry basically has to cull a vast majority of the trucking companies. You saw it with YRC going out of business, Metallark, Convoy. Those are the bigger companies. That's not even including the hundreds, if not thousands, of owner-operators and smaller trucking businesses that have gone out of business this year alone. Let alone what might come in 2024. However, that will also reverse once a certain amount of companies have gone out of business, or once the economy picks back up and spending starts again. When spending starts again, more freight becomes available. That adjusts the market rates via supply and demand. When there's more demand, the prices go up. When there's more supply than demand, the prices go down. And right now, there's very limited demand with an excess of supply. So that's why the freight rates are so low, which is a good opportunity for shippers and for suppliers to take advantage of padding out their profit margins a little bit, because they are experiencing lower costs of shipping rates, which is great for our customers, okay? But it's not good for the trucking companies. Because unfortunately, a lot of the freight that's moving right now is either at break even or below break even, which is why you see a lot of these companies going out of business. So it's got a lot more to do with supply and demand rather than fuel surcharge. Fuel, if anything, has come down a little bit. Not as much as it was pre-COVID, but it still has come down again to around $4 a gallon on the East Coast, a little bit below that, in the Midwest and Mountain States. West Coast is still very expensive. So basically, if you sign yourself onto a long-term contract, you run the possibility of getting stuck at a rate with a customer that you cannot move their freight for anymore, because if the market was to rebound, say in April, May, June, usually the busier time of the year for flatbed freight and for the main economy as a whole, and you're locked into a freight rate that you gave them today, you might not be able to move it for that price. And if you're locked into a long-term contract, they don't really account for fluctuations in market pricing. They just really account for fluctuations in fuel surcharges. So you have the option to either take a loss for the rest of the year, which nobody's going to do, or you could attempt to adjust your price, and if they are a little bit more of an understanding business, they'll be able to accommodate that. Or if you're dealing with some bigger corporate companies, they're not going to be happy about that, and they may shop around and just void your contract. So that's another con, really, of the long-term contracts is that you don't really have the loyalties with your customer, because your customers, chances are, is going to be a bigger corporate customer. That they're not really concerned with, the quality of service that you give them. They're more concerned about the bottom line price, and that's all they care about. And when it comes down to market fluctuations, they may not be so understanding as to why you have to change those freight rates. With the smaller blue collar, brick and mortar businesses, usually you have a lot more loyalty with your customer as long as you are providing an excellent service. Myself, the way I run things is that, yes, you do have to supply some sort of a contract upon, starting to work with a specific customer. My contracts stipulate that you're responsible, or you're held to move one load with my company. That's it. Every year I send a new contract. Obviously, my customers are shipping more than one load with me, but I'm only holding them to one load because my service speaks for itself. If I'm not giving you a good service, I don't expect you to stay with me. End of story. So, I think that every single load that you do, you should have the highest quality service you could possibly offer. So that's the way I run things. It avoids any sticky conversations with your customer in regards to, why is this rate going up? You promised me this was the rate I'd be paying all year. I can't do that, and you're avoiding contract, so on and so forth. Of course, every single load that you book with a customer gets a load tender signed. That's its own individual contract for that specific load. But my annual contracts are really just for one load, and they're basically just a breakdown of liabilities and insurance and so on and so forth. But I don't hold any of my customers to a long-term commitment because I feel that my service is what should warrant whether or not a customer stays with me. Excuse me. So I haven't had any issues with that, because I make sure that every single load I do is above and beyond. That's how I treat my customers. I grew up in a blue-collar family. I grew up around business owners. I spent the last decade running my own trucks. I'm an owner-operator myself. I have my own trucking company, so I get both sides of the fence, and I know what it's like to be, a blue-collar, so I treat my customers, accordingly. I know how hard they work to save $1 or to make $1. So, I go as far as even consulting. If a customer calls me, with, looking for a price on a lane and it's a lot of money, I'll spend a half an hour on the phone with them, trying to find, viable options elsewhere. I'll brainstorm with my customers and try to find a solution for them so that they make money. Because at the end of the day, if they're not making money, then they're not going to stay in business. And if they're not going to stay in business, they're not going to have a need for me. So you gotta look at it that way. You can't look at it like, they're only as good as their last load, and how much money, what kind of profit margin did you make on the last load you ran with them. Sometimes you're gonna break even. Sometimes you're gonna give them a rate, and you're gonna have a whoopsie, and you're gonna short sell yourself, and sometimes you gotta break even. Sometimes you're going to make a big percentage. You're going to give them a price, and you're going to say, I can move it for this, and you find a reliable carrier that's still willing to do it for this amount of money, and you might even be able to discount your customer at the end of the day, which I've done multiple times. I cap myself at 15%. I'm not taking 30-40% like some of these other bigger brokerages. I don't feel it's an ethical way of running a business, and I make sure that if I hit a certain profit margin, that's it. And if I get a truck that it makes me a 20% profit margin on this load, I'm going to call my customer and say, listen, I was able to save you 5%. So let's send you a new invoice with the adjusted rate, and you don't owe me as much as we thought it was going to cost. Another thing with long-term contracts with these bigger companies is that your chances of reputation and referrals, is minimal. If you're running loads for Tyson Chicken, or whoever, XYZ company, they're a big corporate company with 1,000 locations, and You speak to a different person every day. They don't know who you are. They don't appreciate your service and the quality of your service. And those companies, sometimes, yeah, it's better to have a long-term contract with them just for job security purposes to make sure you get their freight every day. But those aren't those are your bill paying loads. Those are your minimal profit margin loads. Those are the loads that cover your base expenses, and that's it. I mean, there's no wiggle room. There's no there's no fluff at the end of anything. Sometimes you're lucky to break even on the entire year with some of those companies, because they got you competing against 12 other brokerages that are all, it's a race to the bottom. In the trucking industry, we call it, on the carrier end of it, we call it the race to the bottom. Bidding against other carriers, bidding against other brokers. The only way to go is down. They don't care that you may be $100 or $200 more than XYZ broker, but your service blows them out of the water. You take care of them. You make sure you're on the carrier left and right. You're making sure that the pickup time is approved before the carrier even got a rate confirmation, so that there's no scheduling conflicts when you send that guy in there. And then the same thing with the delivery location. You're on the phone with them, making sure your appointments are good to go, so there's no scheduling conflicts on that end. So that your customer is not getting a phone call, saying, listen, there's accessorial charges that have to be, compensated for. You have layover, or you have 7 hours of detention because the scheduling was off, or whatnot. You giving that kind of service is what warrants your higher cost, or your higher price, I should say, because your price may be higher, but on the long-term cost end of it, you're actually saving your customer money. As detention could add up quick. That could cost you $500. Somebody's got to pay for that. The trucker, spent a lot of time and money on his equipment. So if he's sitting at a shipper or receiver for 7 or 8 hours, he's going to be expecting some sort of compensation, especially if it's something that was not, at fault of his. If it's a scheduling conflict and the broker didn't do his job and schedule properly, and he's sitting there because the schedule didn't, the broker gave him the wrong appointment time, that's something that could cost the customer a lot of money, or cost the brokerage a lot of money, and something that is unfortunately a commonality with these bigger corporate brokerages. And referrals. These bigger companies, they're not going to refer you. They don't know you. They don't care about you. They don't care about your success. My customers care about my success. Why do they care about my success? Because I care about theirs. That's basically end of story right there. That's as simple as it gets. If you care about your customer success and what you can offer them, they'll care about your success and what they could offer you. They'll call their buddy that runs the same business that they do in another state and say, hey, listen, this guy is great. Give him a call. He may be a little bit more money than XYZ, but man, he's worth it. And you're going to save a whole bunch of money on the back end because you're not going to be losing customers. Your customers aren't going to be disappointed that the trucker that showed up had duct tape holding his truck together and didn't speak a word of English, or there was no communication, or the guy was late, or the guy was just in a sour mood in general just because the rate was so low that, when you got guys running for a loss, you can't expect them to give you good service on the trucking end if they're in a bad mood all the time because they're losing money. So and when you care about your customer success, the only good things come out of that. It builds your reputation, it builds your referrals, and as a small-time operator myself, I base my business off of referrals. I don't have, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year to spend in advertising and marketing. My business comes primarily from referrals from people that have done business with me and are happy with the way I do business. So all in all, that's pretty much the thoughts I have on contracts, long-term or short-term. The only real pros of long-term contracts is, job security and a steady stream of freight. But the probability that you're going to run into issues with the prices that you offer on a long-term contract is a lot higher than the probability of any sort of issues that you have running short-term contracts and, you know, handshake contracts. Basically, you know, contracts, you know, good faith. Good faith is almost like a lost art in this industry, and it goes a lot further than you would think it goes. You know, I mean, operating on good faith and superior service has proven to be, you know, the number way to stay successful in any industry that you operate, not just the trucking industry, not just the brokerage end of the industry, not you know, in any industry. You know, operating on good faith and exceptional service is the number one way to stay and remain successful. So let me know what you guys' thoughts are. You know, I hope I clarified a couple things. I know a lot of people have been, you know, bouncing back and forth between, you know, getting long-term contracts in these darker days of the trucking industry, you know, for job security almost. But, you know, they're very limited as especially in times like this. They're very limited as far as, you know, what the benefits are opposed to what the negatives may possibly be. Have a good one, guys.